Hey, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. So, today I get to be your host. Of course, you know me. My name is Ray Whitaker. I'm from the Lasting Mission podcast. Today, we've got a special guest that's going to be coming on with us, another unique organization that's focused on impacting veterans. In this way, we're going to be focused a little bit on homelessness today. We know through the 2025 priorities, what you guys have asked us to look at, that we wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about it and really understand it, because I do think there's a part of this, a little education and an informative piece of this that needs to happen. And our guest today, Derek Layne, is going to be talking through that just a little bit with us to hopefully make us a little bit smarter. One of the things I want to put, there's a really cool quote that we have here that we got. I want to read this. You guys know that I don't remember very well, so we're going to read this instead to make sure it's good. But veteran homelessness is a persistent crisis in the United States. Today, we'll examine the root causes, the current statistics, and the solutions being developed to address this critical issue, including Mighty Hero Homes' unique approach to it. And without further ado, Derek, we want to welcome you to the Lasting Mission podcast. And I'd love to learn a little bit about you and kind of your story leading up to where you are now.
Sure. Well, thank you, Ray, for having me. It's an honor to be here. My background, was raised. My father was a Navy veteran. He served for the GI Bill, right? He was not a good kid growing up, and so he needed some discipline. So he went into the Navy. Had an opportunity to go to Vietnam. Chose to go ahead and accept going to college, which probably thankful for not me being here, or that may not have happened. So, but my mom's father, my grandfather, was a dear close friend of mine, and he was a World War II veteran. And while he didn't talk much about his experiences during the war, his brother had gotten killed by a sniper. My grandfather had his leg blown off by stepping on a landmine in Aachen, Germany, and just it gave me such an appreciation for the heart and the resilience of people like my grandfather. It just endeared me to the military. I've always enjoyed, whether it be Band of Brothers type of shows or whatever. Though it just seeing what these individuals went through, what they were willing to sacrifice, and it just always needing to be, especially when you're engaged in the theater like they were, right? Always needing to be on. You never really had any rest, and it just, that's something that I just can't relate to, right? And it's something that I just hold all of you, right, that served in such high regard, whether you went into a military theater or not. The fact that you were willing to is something that it is very impressive to me. The Lord called me to do something else, right? I looked at going into the Navy actually in high school. Ended up getting into Auburn University, went to college there, majored in TV and film, but somehow made the jump right into investment banking. So I don't know how that worked out, but it worked out in my favor. And so my background was involved in the real estate investment banking side, and back during the financial crisis is really where I kind of reinvented myself. And I'd come up with an idea for veteran housing as we were ending our engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan. And my travels took me to Seattle, San Francisco, Phoenix, Vegas, San Diego, mostly because I was out in Santa Monica. So I met veterans on planes, in restaurants, and Vegas pools, wherever, and just was constantly hearing what they were struggling with as they came back, and it broke my heart. And so my focus was housing. Being in the real estate investment banking space, I knew people who ran the books, whether it be foreclosure, the scratch and debt books at Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Bank of America. I worked for, at the time, even though we were on the commercial side, we worked for the largest residential lender in the country. So my Rolodex was infinite. And anyone that I spoke with said, hey, obviously us, the financial world, right, we're a 4-letter word in the marketplace because everybody blames the crisis on us. So I know you're sitting on a lot of residential, portfolio that needs help. So why don't you donate it over to a 501c3 I will set up? I'll do any renovations that need to happen for a disabled veteran or whatever. Take out the loan with you, for the veteran or whatnot. Try to have it kind of to be a model of the mortgage free type of approach. And so that was one of the pillars. And then again, meeting these veterans, across the West Coast, constantly kept running into. I go to the VA. And they push another pill across the desk, right? I need mental help. I need to talk to someone about my problem. And, that constant, pushback from them, right? Where you could see they were growing disgruntled with the VA and the help they were getting there. So that became pillar number 2, the mental health therapy. Then the employment side. One of my close friends worked for a career builder at the time. So he knew all of the organizations that would prefer to hire a veteran that was, all things being equal, they would prefer to hire a veteran for myriad of reasons. So that became pillar 3. And then 4th was knowing that the suicide rate was increasing too dramatically. I mean, one suicide is too much, but knowing what it was even back in 2009, 2010. So then I went to the pet adoption, and the research I had talked with groups about was, if a veteran is ready to take their life, or anybody, but in particular, since I was focused on veterans, and they look over and see a pet, right, and they say, well, who's going to take care of that pet if I do this, right? And just that split second may cause them, right, to delay for 10 minutes that then a phone call comes, right? Whatever it was. And so those were the 4 pillars that I happened upon. For whatever reason, the Lord didn't bless me with pursuing that or having that be successful. Fast forward to 2021, and when I communicated that to a gentleman here in Atlanta that just, again, by divine providence, I was introduced to, he said, you need to talk to Drew Walston. And Drew is the founder of Mighty Hero Homes. And so I'm blessed to walk alongside him in this effort, because he had put together, for those that, will go to our website and see what we've laid out at mightyherohomes.org. You'll be able to see a base concept design, and we're building tiny home kind of casitas. And so that was a vision that came up on him. I know we'll get to that probably, a little bit later, but that was something that when he told me what he was trying to do, it fit perfectly with what I was wanting to do, 10, 12 years ago, that just happened to come to fruition at the right time.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, first off, oftentimes we as veterans think about folks, thanking us for our service. And what I would tell you is, realistically, what we do is we serve with the thought of doing it for others. Right. And I often hear stories all the time, and I'm not sure that anybody needs to quantify why they didn't go in service ever. Right. Because, not everybody can be in the military, just like not everybody's going to go to college, and just like not everybody can be a doctor or lawyer, so forth and so on. We all have a path that we lead, and however you get to that path is the path that you go. What I will tell you is that, your service that you're doing now is very much like the service that we did, right? It's not about us. Yeah. It is truly about those that are around us. So the first thing I want to do is thank you for thinking about veterans, thinking about what, we have gone through. Some take it harder than others, and some, things just happen. So that the fact that you guys have found a gap, and as you talked about traveling around, seeing people, talking to people, and understanding that there are things that veterans can use help with, and then trying to fill that gap is your own type of service. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
The second part is, you talk about animals. One of the cool parts is I love dogs, right? So anybody knows me knows I love dogs. Auburn, since it's your alumni there, has one of the best veterinarian schools. I remember as a kid, part of the reason that I became a dog guy many, many moons ago is because of Auburn. I grew up in Florida, and I just absolutely loved the college, everything about what that college was. And then the idea of, I never wanted to be a vet. But that's why in my career, I kind of moved into dog handling and other stuff because of that. So I just thought it was kind of a coinkydink. We didn't talk about this before, but it was kind of there.
A couple things. I mean, I've got some friends that graduated from veterinarian school down at Auburn. My roommate was actually the mascot for Auburn. He was the first national champion mascot for Auburn. He wanted to be a vet. We couldn't have dogs in the house at the time, so I lived with, I think during the course of the 3.5 years that he and I lived together, I think we had probably 6 or 7 or 8 snakes. We had an alligator, right? We had a pet goat, right? So he wanted to be a veterinarian. He wanted to practice on, raise anything he could until we could have dogs in the house. So.
Yeah. And it's great. I used to think Auburn was the only one. And then, of course, now, I'm in North Carolina. And I know here in this state, they got NC State, which is another really good veterinarian school. So it's just like, it's just really kind of interesting how that touches. And the fact that you see the idea of that's another unique type of therapy for veterans that is very much about, if you're taking care of somebody else, it's our service is about other people. It becomes really hard when it's just about us. Yeah. Right. At the end of the story, you want me to talk about me, man? Oh boy, this ain't going to go well. Right. But if you want me to talk about Derek Layne, I got you. I'll research him. I'll talk about him all day and make him feel good, and his head will just continue to grow. Right. Like that. That's how we're kind of built. So I want to say the interesting thing is, you talked about Seattle. You talked about multiple locations that you had traveled to that we know has, somewhat of a homeless pandemic in some of those locations. Right. I am blessed in my own right, because I do have a house, and I have not, I've been lucky enough to have not done well early on in my life, with monetary and understanding that just how important it is.
Yeah.
Now I do much better in life. Like I have a family, all these things that kind of drive me to be. But sometimes folks, they get offline and
Yeah.
it's all hard to dissect what the root causes are with this, right? And there's a lot of misconceptions as I started to look at like suicide and homelessness. Many of these areas, I really started to learn things that I didn't know, right? Like all
Yeah.
of my misconceptions about why were were actually not true, right? It's like, oh, they just don't want to work. No,
Right.
that's not always the case. And like there's
Yeah.
so many things that are going. One of our other organizations that we're related to talking about suicide in general, we know that there is some veterans and just homeless folks in general that addiction is part of that process, and they're not even accounted into the 17 to 22, however many
Right.
veterans commit suicide. They're not even counted in that number because they're not really. It's an unknown entity, right? It's separate to somebody doesn't see somebody that overdosed as somebody who committed suicide. So this is, in my mind, it's something that we're focused on. I mean, our veteran community has said, hey, we want to focus on homelessness. There's over 30,000 here for veterans, if the number's correct in my mind.
Right.
If there's just one, it's like suicide. If there's
Too,
one, we want to
there's too
combat it.
many.
So
Right.
what I would love to talk to you a little bit about is first,
Mhm.
set the stage for me to kind of understand the current state of homelessness. Is it truly a crisis? Is it a pandemic? Is it as bad as I think it is, or is it really, maybe not as bad as I think it is?
Yeah, no, great question. The reason why Hero Homes became what it is, right, and the reason why Drew founded the vision is, he had the wake up call of, hey, you're going to be my guy to eradicate veteran homelessness, and Drew said, well, God, I think you stopped at the wrong house because I'm not a veteran and I've never been homeless. So where do I even start?
That's right.
And he set out originally to find a great organization, right, to make a donation to, and maybe go and support in person. And the more he looked into it and really researched it, he realized that the gap, and I know we'll talk about that gap, right, was the permanent affordable housing side of it, where individuals can move into and they never have to leave. A lot of transitional housing, right, and we know those national firms or whatever that provide the national or the transitional housing. And so what he started realizing was that number. I think at that time and you'll see probably on our website, a lot of our numbers are the 37,000, and that was the number that was the VA had indicated was the homeless count through what's called a PIT. You probably know what that is, the point in time count that they do every January or every other January. And so that number was 37,000 at the time. So that had been 2020 going into 2021. And what we've discovered since then, well, two things. One, the current state, if you listen to the VA's numbers in that point in time, is about 35 to 36,000. The problem that we have as organizations with that number, and it doesn't really matter which veteran organization you talk to, they'll tell you that that number is off by sometimes a factor of 2 or 3, depending on who you're talking to. So it is a major crisis. And that's what led Drew to saying, I've got to do something because this isn't being solved. Between 2010 and 2020, the VA and the government spent about $10 billion to address it. And some of it was HUD-VASH vouchers, right? So it helped individuals get off the street. But a lot of it was setting up programs and, building websites and pamphlets and stuff like that. And so a lot of that money didn't go to the actual need that was there of actually providing housing. It didn't build a house, right? It didn't build an apartment building, for example. But so in that transition, what we've seen is the VA will come out and say in November, hey, we've housed 48,000. This is their number now. We housed 48,000, veterans in 2024. Well, their number is going to come out in January is going to be there's still 38,000 homeless veterans. And so what we've tried to communicate to the VA, and we know other groups have as well, is you're kind of confusing the issue because you're telling the public, hey, we're solving it, yet that number is the same. And there's reasons why that number stays the same, is equal to, maybe slightly higher or lower. A lot of it has to do with the recidivism. But so it is a crisis, and it's something that one, the term veteran and homelessness should never be used in the same sentence unless it's a veteran is helping solve homelessness, right? But as far as being next to each other, that's something that it's shameful, right? It's a blight on our country that we've allowed this to happen. So it is a crisis, and we're obviously one of many, and it'll take 100 of us and 10 of the largest organizations that everybody knows that are trying to help this issue to solve the issue. It's not going to be one group doing it. It's going to take a united effort to rally, around a flag together to solve this issue.
Yeah, that's such a unique. I often talk to folks about, hey man, why is there 40,000 veteran service organizations, right? Like that just
Right.
doesn't make sense. And I think you're saying it right now of like you're one organization, right? And
Mhm.
I would love your organization. I would love after this podcast, somebody come in, grab and say, man, this is the best idea ever. And we get all 38,000 immediately because somebody
Right.
comes in and we figure it out. The
Yeah.
reality was that's not the reality, right? Like the
Right.
goal is, man, if you can help 500 or 1,000 a year, okay, there's still 37,000 more, right? So the fact
Right.
that you have other nonprofits out there and why, from our perspective from Mission Roll Call is why we talk to organizations like yours is like, we're all on the same team, all
Yep.
of us, right? It's why we
Right.
have a coalition. We all have to work together. We have to figure this out. And I get it. We understand that money from donors has to go to all of us, right? Because we're all asking. But at the end of the day, for us, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if we're doing nonprofit work the right way, the goal is that you eradicate the issue or the thing, and
Right.
the nonprofit is no longer here. It
Right.
goes away,
And
right? Because
yeah.
we have done our work. So
Right.
I
And
don't
that's
know
the
what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, one, you've meant two things there. One, coalition, right? I've been put together a coalition of the willing. I've got my spreadsheet still open today, right? If I meet somebody that's an elected politician or something, or a city council member, whatever it may be, they go into my coalition of the willing if they say, yeah, this is an issue, we need to help solve it. So, I've got a long list that I'm building. I've got a veteran service organization list, and then, politicians and just those individuals that we know, at a executive level want to make a difference. So you get that. And then the other thing is the partnership side, because
Yeah.
we don't care who gets the credit. If we in this call or on this, you said, Ray or Derek, I've got an organization that's 2 years ahead of you or 5 years ahead of you or has a widget that's better than yours, but they can take what you have and combine it and they can solve the issue. I would say, Ray, what's their phone number? Let's get on the phone with them. Let's talk about how we can make this happen, and we can hand that off because to us we're just being obedient, and if our obedience leads us to that group who's going to take it across the goal line, and
Yeah.
by all means, right? We want to be part of that. We want to collaborate and partner with it. And so we're always out saying, one, we want to collaborate and partner with anybody. Two, we got to build a coalition of the willing. And three, I want to pick up the phone in 10 years and say, Ray, I just handed the key to the last homeless veteran. Do you have a job for me? Right? I want to work myself out of a job. And this is a monumental effort, a Herculean effort, right? It's not something that's going to be solved overnight, but with the right teamwork, with that right coalition, with the right support from Congress, right? The right support from a state capital, right? You can make an impact in your community, in your state, and obviously at a national level. We just have to find the right people who are going to be that lightning rod to make it happen.
No, well, that's good. Well, we look forward to working this with you. Okay,
Thank
the
you.
next part of this is the individuals, right? So we've talked about
Mhm.
this idea that the government's got to take some ownership here, right?
Right.
And I've said this in life. There's two things that I remember from my childhood. From we'll just say somebody. I won't say who it was, but
Mhm.
that said this to me one time was you got to be responsible and accountable for your own actions,
Right.
right? Like you have to. And when you understand it that you need to do this, that doesn't make life easier. It just
Right.
helps you understand that you got to be responsible and accountable. So there's a part of this where we've talked about the government side of this where we're spending a lot of money and we're not having the outcome that we want. Let's let's try to figure it out. And it's why VSOs like yourself or really nonprofits in general or exist is to help with that. The
Right.
second part though is really the individuals,
Mhm.
right? Can't always say that it's their that they are responsible from it
Right.
or even accountable. In some cases, they may. So with that, I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts. You've talked to a lot of folks out and about. Talked to a lot of individuals that have obviously focused on this as being their thing. What are some of the root causes that you're hearing, and then any trends that have happened maybe over the last 5 or 10 years from your
Yeah.
perspective?
First of all, to address just the fastest growing segment of veteran homelessness is single parents, in particular, single mothers, right? And a lot of that is from domestic abuse, right? And just family breakups, which, you know, we constantly hear oh, life happened, right? This happened, and then this happened, and then it just spiraled out of control. And any of us know, whether we were a teenager, right, playing sports or whatever, one thing happens, now you kind of become depressed, and then something else happens, and it just kind of seems to pile on top of each other, and you're almost like, I can't get out of my own way. And so that is one thing that leads to it. And And there's usually a trigger event, right? Is that trigger event either, again, is a substance abuse where, maybe they're in a job that they don't like, right? And so, or something's happening at home. And so they tend to focus on, well, I'm going to self-medicate to get through this. And then it ends up in a family breakup, right? Now they're out on the street. We were at a conference 2 Januaries ago through a local organization here in Atlanta called Betlanta, which is fantastic. And there they had pro bono attorneys that were helping with legal issues that these individuals were coming across. And they were saying at the time that what they were seeing the greatest cause at that particular time over that kind of 12-month period was divorce. And divorce was leading to obviously legal bills. They were going to lose whatever half of what they had already. And so that was leading to a really drastic uptick. So the chronic homelessness generally tends to be that just life happens, right? They become self-medicated, right? They just, I can't get out of my own way. And they do kind of pity themselves. And nobody, while there's, again, a lot of great organizations out there, if they're hard to find, how does that person find hope, right? And so whether it be the mental health side of it, which depending on which city, right, it's typically around 30% is a mental health. About 20, a quarter of it or so is substance abuse. A quarter of it is some type of chronic health condition. 10 or 11% is divorce. So these are all the factors that kind of weigh in. And, again, I go through a divorce. Now I self-medicate. I'm self-medicating. That leads to a divorce, right? So they kind of all go hand in hand, unfortunately. And our mission, like what we try to do and what we say is in building these homes and making these communities, is we're restoring hope and dignity, right? That then leads to kind of a renewed faith and love for themselves and their neighbor, but then also a restored purpose, right? And that was a question that one of our board members, a 2-star general, retired, spoke about when he was asked, hey, veteran comes onto your base, like how do you help them from day 1 to day 365? And he was about, it's restored hope. We're bringing hope back to these individuals and purpose, because in the military, they had a purpose. Even if it was, hey, you're cleaning the latrines, right? Every day when you woke up, you knew for the next week, that was your job, right? There was a purpose to it. And so everyone is cohesive, right? You got your guy on your left, the woman on your right, somebody's got your 6. And so you're all advancing, one team, one mission. And when they come out, right, they're not, even though they may be working for a great team at, name your top, Fortune 500 company, it's not the same type of team. And I can't relate to this. I'm just going off of, what I've been told by veterans that have encountered this. And so they have a lack of purpose. And so they're trying to find that. And that leads to, again, all the things that we just kind of talked about. And trauma, a trauma that happened, in the theater, right? If something happened to them with, and I can touch on, a homeless veteran that I spoke to, who sat down with me for an interview. And, he was a gunner on a Humvee and got rocked on an IED and got thrown out. And, he's dealt with head issues, right? And TBI. And it led to 37 medications that the VA had prescribed. And that when those weren't working, right, because one canceled the other type of thing, he went to self-medicating and then ended up homeless, right? And then a veteran treatment court. And so that's just one of the groups or one of the things that happens. They come back, and what he had told me, and this was heartbreaking for me to understand or for me to learn, was he got back to it. He was at Fort Bliss, so he came back from his theaters in both battles of Fallujah, ended up back in New York, and then back in Fort Bliss. In Fort Bliss, he was there 30 days from when he last saw combat. I don't know if that combat was Fallujah or not, but he had last saw combat was in 30 days. So they did a drug test of the base. And 75%, I think he said, of his squadron or whatever, all failed. Well, 100% of those that failed had seen combat within 60 days. So they're not coming back with a way to deal with it there, to cope, right, with what they've seen, right, to be taken to kind of decompress, right, and walk through, talk about your issues. Let's figure this out together. It's just, and he said, they gave me a pat on the back and said, we'll call you when we need you, right? And so it's just, and that's, again, spiraled them out of control, right? It's just a kind of a life happens thing. Thing kept piling up.
Yeah, it's an interesting how difficult it is, right? I wonder. I was talking to my kid, and one of the interesting things was, hey, I've got to have a credit card to buy things, right? But to buy things, you gotta have like, it's just like this weird dynamic you gotta have. And this
Yeah.
is, and I only relate that to this because that same kind of mindset where you need a house to live, but to live, you need a job, right?
Right.
But then to have a job, you've got to have like, you can't have all of these other things that are, these extra things that are happening, legal bills
Right.
and like all of these kids.
Yeah.
There's a lot of point. I mean, I look back and I was gone the majority of the time, and I mean, my better half took care of our son. I mean, like, he is
Yeah.
the man that he is because of her. It's not like I don't try to placate to say that I really had much to do with
Right.
his growth, right? That is her.
Yeah.
And how thankful I am that she was there to do that. But my mind, I also realized that, man, what if she had a job? What if, how much more difficult would that have been? What would the same have happened? And I look back in my life and think about my mom. It was my mom, and she
Right.
worked, and she was hardly ever there. And yeah, I also GI Billed. It
Yep.
came in because there
Yeah.
was a reason, and so
Sure.
there's a lot of unique little pieces that are there, for that. The other thing I wanted to touch on is just like this idea of mental health and mental wellness and for
Mhm.
bliss, right?
Yep.
Um, One of the things I think that folks and people talk about it, but I don't know that they like to talk about it. The first thing is, it's really hard to talk about, anything negative that happens in your life just in general, right? Like it's just hard to it is hard to walk into a room to be weak in front of other people, right?
Especially
That's true.
men.
Yeah.
Especially men. Right.
But I think, yeah, especially me, but I think that's almost
Sure.
all people don't want to walk into a room to somebody that you don't know, and maybe even your family, and give them any reason to think any different of you as a man, as a woman, or, whatever. Like, it's hard. It's hard to do that just starting off.
Right.
But then you go into a job that's all about, being the top of your profession, right? You're in a competitive basis. I mean, let's not kid the people that serve to the right and left of me. My job was to look better than them, but to also understand they were my brothers and sisters, right? But
Right.
there's a point, like, we're gonna take a PT test, man. Like, you're not, no, no, no.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask.
I
So
gotta
now
I
you
wanna
want
beat
me
you.
to come in and tell you that, like, I'm having these thoughts or these dreams or these feelings? Like, no, man. Like, it's not
Sure.
gonna happen, right? So what ends up happening is you're pushing it further and further down. Um, what I tell guys and gals now is, don't do that. Like, you better let it go soon, right?
Mhm.
It's like a kettle or a pot.
Yep.
The more it gets, at some point, it's going to
Uh,
explode. You
yeah.
would rather lift the lid every once in a while, let
Right.
it come
Yeah.
out, put the lid back on, but do not do it. So there has been a change in the military. I hope there continues to be a change in the military where you can feel confident to come in, have a conversation with people. And look, if I don't feel confident talking to the other people that are inside of my organization because I don't want that, they give me the ability to go see somebody where I can. And I do think the military is going to continue to make strides in that. And I think that's going to be a huge basis of what needs to be looked at, because you're talking about those root causes. This is definitely one of those root causes, right? Like, that kettle blew, and not just one thing. It is like multiple things now that have hit at the same time. And now you're in this situation where, how do I problem solve all of these things?
Right.
Right.
It's hard to
From an
process.
organization where you're enabled, because the
Yeah.
military enables me to do everything. I don't pay my bills. Well, you do, but
Right.
somebody pays me. If I got medical stuff, I go see a doctor. If I
Right.
need food, I go to the chow hall. Like, everything I need. I'm a war fighter, man. That's what I do. I don't need to worry about that. And all of a sudden, one day you step out, and it's like you ain't got nobody there to ask the question to. You
Right.
know?
Well, I mean, in the military, and again, I didn't go through it, so I'm just speaking from other people's experiences. That you enter the military, and of course you've got however you were brought up, right? You're used to the way you're disciplined, and you're used to waking up and doing this and doing that, right? We all have our routine. Then military, you get in and they strip you down, right? They rebuild you. They completely bring you down to a new basis, and then they're going to redevelop you. So they redevelop you into the warrior or the engineer, whatever they're trying to get from you, right? What they need from your expertise, right, to make a cohesive unit. And so they build you up. Well, then when you come out again, you had a purpose. Now you're stepping back out into what you were just talking about, right? I was cared for. I had kind of entitlement. I knew I was enabled, right? Then you come out, and all of a sudden, like, wow, I've been away from this for 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, however long you were in. And then you're now having to tear down what you've learned and rebuild yourself back to being a civilian. And that can be difficult. And especially like you're talking about, if you're dealing with mental trauma, right? And whether it be on the female side and male side now, obviously, as we know that we're bigendered in the military, but medical or military sexual trauma, right?
Yeah.
That to women, I mean, it's there's a group here in Georgia that we talk with, and it's heartbreaking, right? What these women have experienced, and so they carry that with them because again, they come out, I'm military, I can't talk about it, I got to be strong. But
That's
then when
right.
they get to the root cause of why is this happening, that ends up all bearing out. And so, our biggest, I mean, when our veterans come onto our bases, right, and we have our community center, mental health is by far and away what's going to be the lion's share of daily activity, right, for these individuals to seek and have on base where they can walk across to the commissary and then say, I need to go and talk with somebody, right, and they'll be the therapist will be there on site to help because again, once if you haven't talked about it, right, and you generally they're coming to us from programs they graduated from, so they dealt with this mostly, maybe not 100%, but they dealt with it mostly to where now they're coming to us with a file, so we know what they were battling to make sure that we could prepare for them and their continued care in that mental health aspect.
Yeah. You said something interesting. I try to remember the word, but you were saying so many other things that was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's always this conversation that's had, right? And this is an opinion. Okay. So whenever not everybody's going to agree with this opinion. That's okay. That's why we're allowed them.
Correct.
One of the things that I hear when folks leave, is like that veterans feel like they deserve things, right?
Uh-huh.
We just talked about enablement in service. There's a reason that enablement's there, right? And how you look at enablement from 3 years to 20 years is different. So when I leave service, the way I look at it is it's not about the veteran deserving, for Veterans Day to have free food at O'Charlie's, right? I don't think organizations understand why that's important. The people that go to that may, because do you know the one time a year I always see veterans is on Veterans Day at the same location that I've been going to now for 5 years. And it's
Right.
not even about the food, right? Because I still end up paying but it's the fact that that restaurant doesn't understand that
Yeah.
they've now brought me together with people that I never would have been brought back together with
Yeah.
because of that day. And it's our thing now, right? Like it's a day of like, thing. But again, anyway, so that enablement, it's not about that there's any kind of deserve, but you can't just like push somebody out, the aircraft at 1 o'clock in the morning when there's clouds with a parachute. We did
Right.
that in the military. It's
Yeah.
unfair to do that to me also when I leave service and
Sure.
not understand it's not about me being entitled. It's not about that I deserve this, but
Right.
like any human, I deserve help, right?
Yeah.
I deserve to understand what I'm moving towards. And I
Right.
think that that's the characteristic of what you guys are talking about now is like, hey, they deserve the opportunity to be able to afford the things that they need to live a productive life, right? Like
Right.
that, you deserve that. Everybody deserves that. It's just that we're focused on veterans. Look, if I could
Right.
do all of it, I would, right? Like if I could somehow we could figure out, mission, but that's not our mission. Our mission is
Right.
veterans, right? And their
Yep.
families. So
Yep.
I wanted to just throw on top of that because I thought that was such a interesting thing that you had noted there. So I think that the human impact is part of this, right? We talked about that. I think the part for me, we know that it matters, but why does solving this matter? Like
Right.
other than the stuff that we know from your
Right.
perspective, why do we need to
Yeah. I
solve
mean,
it?
well, one, it's we constantly hear the not in my backyard, right? And so if we're going into county commissioners or city council or just whoever, right? It's well, it's going to drive values down. My constituents aren't going to go for it, this, that, and the other. We heard of, I say we, Drew, heard a gentleman tell him from a veteran service organization, the not in my backyard, sure, that passes the buck. But that veteran or that homeless person, doesn't matter if it's just dealing with homelessness or veteran homelessness,
Sure.
that person is going to end up on your front yard, right? So you may not want them in your backyard, but they're going to end up in your front yard. And it's a way of just saying this is a problem that's in our face and we have to deal with it. And just reading this morning about the guy who looks at himself in the mirror and then walks away and doesn't recognize himself, doesn't remember who he is, right?
That's
and
right.
and that's what we try to do. We try to, this is somebody else's problem to deal with, right? And again, I got to bring back the VA supposedly is dealing with the problem, but we know, right, the two of us and our organizations and the multiple organizations, like you said, the 40,000 out there, this isn't being, it's being dealt with, but it's not being solved. And it's becoming a greater crisis. And so the impact that it has on medical services, law enforcement, right, legal costs, right, court costs, like just the impact on cities. I think in San Diego, for example, and they don't really deal with, they don't have a paper that's talking about veteran homelessness, but homelessness, $111,000 a year per taxpayer, right, to handle a homeless person, do all the services, just the defeat of the legal side, right, that they take up so much of just interactions, right, with police that should be helping save someone, not having to go and or accost and arrest somebody because they're sleeping on a park bench type of thing, right? And so those issues get tied up. And so we made a presentation to the VA. They were trying to help with the West LA VA Medical Center, which I know very well. I used to live literally a 9-iron from that medical center, which cut through it every day going to work in Westwood. And the presentation we made, they were looking for just immediate shelter, just to get the veterans that were sleeping on the sidewalk out front, just inside their campus, but housed, right, where they had a roof over their head while they redid the interior of those buildings. And we came up with a solution for them to say, hey, we'll provide those little, kind of shelters, 8x8 and 8x12 shelters, but we also need your help in land, right? Helping us find land, whether it be county land, city land, help us wherever it is. But by doing this, by getting a homeless veteran off the street, it would reduce the overall cost to a city by over 60% within 3 years. And I remember talking to someone about this, and I won't say the organization they were a part of, but they said they're never going to go for it. And I said, well, why? It's taxpayer money. We're helping the city, because now they can focus that money on infrastructure. They can focus that money on whatever it may be. They said, because you're now taking a in perpetuity program, right? A budget item away from the VA. And I said, that's just wrong. Right, we're trying to help individuals, and we're ending a meal ticket for people within government and in bureaucracy. And we got lobbyists going to lobby for that. We know that it's going to be very difficult to get that taken care of. And so that's a problem that we face, and that's not going to be solved overnight, as we know. It's a Leviathan that just isn't going to be solved.
That's right.
Anytime soon, right? But those are the issues I think that people need to understand and address, is that if we do solve this issue with housing and then provide them the wraparound services. There was a report done, and I was trying to find it in preparation for this, that I read a couple of years ago, that I think the city of Denver had done. It was either Denver or Boise. I think it was Denver. And it was the housing first model, right? And just by providing a house to a homeless person, that solves it, right? That's the mentality is, now the issue is done. And what they found was that within 2 years, 24% of those homeless people had overdosed or committed suicide in the apartment or the room that they were given. And the reason is because it wasn't addressing the other things that they needed help with. And so that housing first model as a landlord, I can't ask about, hey, for me to give you a place, right, and to bring you into my apartment building or my housing, I gotta make sure you're getting the mental help that you need. I wasn't allowed to do that as a landlord. It was, nope, you just got to provide them housing. We at the VA will help them with everything else. Well, they weren't finding the help that they needed, right? And so that opened up the door to me of saying, okay, the wraparound services that Drew has put together, right, we even need to expand on those. So going back to your canine training service, right? On ours, we know we can't in every community just with zoning issues, but we hope to have a canine service training dog facility on every location that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so our veterans can become trainers. That's a way of making it, earning income.
There you go.
They can train their own dog, right? That then they say, I don't want to be a trainer, but I want to train my own dog. Now I have my own dog on my base and in my home. So those type of things, right, are revenue and income opportunities for these individuals. But it's also something that the community will take great pride in, of knowing, hey, this veteran, right, one is saving me money, taxpayer money, right? So my money's not having to go to find shelter for these individuals, or they have a run-in with the law. So there's all kinds of waterfall effects that taking care of this issue solves or helps within just our own pocketbooks, as well as city councils and stuff, that have now freed up money to focus where it should go. Not that it shouldn't go to helping the homeless, but why don't we take these people off the street, get them the housing they need, get them the services they need, solve that issue, have them be, contributing members of society, right? Restore that hope, change that community for generations, And then now we can target that money over here to the potholes that you guys always complain about that need to be fixed, right? So,
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of quandrum, right? Like we're not going to get into politics here because
right,
that's not the
right,
basis of what this podcast portion is focused on. But
sure,
um, there is a limit to what the government can do, and then what we
mhm,
got to do, right? And
right,
and it's that fine line. It's like the accordion, like you're playing that accordion back and forth, man, and all through that, if you do it right, if all the pieces are playing appropriately and they're all kind of hitting, man, the impact that you can make on your community, your county, your city, your state,
right,
is substantial, right?
mhm,
It truly is. Folks
yep,
can come in with the mindset of, man, if I can. Some of the best nonprofits that I've ever seen are like the smallest nonprofits that nobody will ever hear from, ever,
right, yeah,
because they are so focused in their community at the lowest level to make the
right,
impact. And it's remarkable the amount of people that they're truly impacting based off of the work that they do.
right,
Um,
oh yeah,
and I think that it all kind of goes together where, from the stuff that I read and even talking to you and just like listening and learning about this problem, the solutions are not easy, right?
mm-mm,
Because you're going to have a large group that's going to blame the government on one side, right? This is the VA
right,
problem. They got to fix it. And from mission roll call's perspective in general, it's a shared problem. But
right, oh yeah,
if we're gonna put money towards this problem, let's make sure that we're accountable for that money. Let's make
right,
sure that what we are putting into it makes sense. It's helping. It's not contributing to other things, right? Which goes
right,
back. I love your first home kind of idea and like that idea of wrapping services around it and the coalition. Again, it
mhm,
goes back to the whole conversation we had at the beginning, right? We
yep,
can't do this alone.
right,
There is no such thing as everybody's got the Swiss Army knife. One
but
nonprofit is not going to be the Swiss Army knife, man. It's
right,
not. Like you
yeah,
need the organizations that can help because they focus on that, and you want them like that, right? It's like
sure,
doctors. Am I going to go get my leg amputated from a doctor that is a dentist? They're a
right, yeah,
doctor. No, like
yeah,
I'm not. You know what I mean? Like the
right,
guy that's going to do. Let's make sure it's the right person, the right gal or girl that's in there doing it. Let's not go towards that thing. So when you think
right,
about the challenges or really the long term solutions, because that's really where we want to focus.
right,
Um, what are you seeing from the traditional housing programs that currently exist, and then any gaps in resources that are happening in some of the locations where we know there's a lot of homeless folks that are veterans?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the traditional housing approach is the apartment style, approach, right? And you have some organizations obviously out there now going and buying, dilapidated hotels and then turning those into mini suites and putting little kitchenettes in or whatever, and bringing, again, much needed housing, much needed cover, and they have the services provided, either there or they're near a VA base where they can access those services and have case management. So the traditional what we're seeing, and I've, again, chatted with the largest veteran housing organization in the country, at length, and they battle the same issues we battle, right? The
Sure.
permitting, the code regulations, the,
For sure.
how many, can I reduce parking, right? It's like all of these things that has to do with the development side has been the greatest challenges. Because again, like we kind of talked about earlier, this isn't a red or blue issue. Everybody rallies around it, right? You're dealing with veterans, like, oh, how do I help them? Right. And whether I'm helping them by sending them on a retreat with their other veteran, counterparts, they need a week's reprieve, right? To just, be around men and women like that they serve with, or do I provide, 1 month's worth of rent, right, to a group? And so, and like you were talking about, there's all these different veterans organizations. Where do I send my money? But so the permitting and the regulation side is a major stumbling block to housing and to developing more housing. You do have the affordability crisis, right, which we're all seeing, right? That impacts, whether we're someone making 100,000 or making $25,000 a year. Where do I go that's affordable, right? I'm trying to help, my parents right now. They live in a house that they've owned for 40, almost 40 years now. Well, if they sell that, they've got to move 30 miles away to be able to, retire, right, and have some type of savings. So it's not affordable, right, in the community we're in. And so those are the issues that you deal with on the permanent side, the regulation side, and then the affordability side. And the HUD-VASH voucher, part of the equation. The county I live in here in Georgia is Cobb County, and this is back towards the end of 2022. I was speaking with a lady that kind of is part of the COC there, and she said there's 17 HUD-VASH vouchers that are in the hands of veterans. None of them are being used. because there weren't any landlords that wanted to accept them. And there's myriad reasons for that. I can jack the rent higher on, market level rent versus the HUD VASH. It's going to take much longer to get that. The safety issue, right? How do I know what these problems that they were dealing with before? So there's all kinds of reasons why the landlord's not doing that. Well, those national organizations and those local veterans villages that are building these small homes or building these new apartment communities like us, we're the landlord that will take them, right? I talk to someone at the VA or HUD probably at least once a week, right? Of how many HUD VASH vouchers are allocated, how many are available, right? If I'm coming into your community, what's the process? Who do I speak with on having to do this? So there's solutions out there that we can do, but the major problem is kind of that continued one. Here in Georgia, we have 152 counties, I think, or 159. I think only 7 of them have a tiny home ordinance of some sort, right? And quite frankly, some of our homes are too small for that ordinance, and they won't budge, right? Their ordinance is X, and our home is, this small. Well, can't do it. So you have all kinds of issues like that you battle. But high density, where do you find the land in high density? Well, you can't make sense of it as a landlord because just the monetary side. If I got to go pay X amount per acre and I can only put X amount units on it, I just can't make heads or tails of it. And especially when it's a for-profit. I mean, obviously nonprofits have to make money to continue to service the program, the veterans that they need, but it's a catch-22, right? How do I go to somebody and say, Ray, would you be willing to make no money and have a donation to help house homeless veterans, or maybe a social impact investment vehicle, 3% or 4% return? So you're solving a need, but you're not getting rich off of it, right? And so, I've had tons of my friends have done extremely well in their life, and they all love what I'm doing now. And they're just saying, hey, when you get to that point where you've got property and you're ready to build, you're ready to go vertical, right? Let me know, right? And I'll step into that. And so it's really, again, just kind of bringing that coalition together that wants to solve it, make it happen. And those communities that are willing to push those boundaries a little bit, and we talk to lieutenant governors and we talk to, again, city, county commissioners, the chairs and stuff. And all of them say, hey, I definitely want that, but, right. Yeah. And so it's, yeah. And I know, you probably want to talk about, challenges and the things that are keeping developments from happening, which we could probably touch on here now, I guess. It's that, in Henry County, for example, where we got approval a year ago, November, county commissioners are all for it. They love what we're going to do, right? They rallied around it, made it happen. The mayor of this particular city loves what we're doing. We're friendly with her. She wants to see it happen in her community because they want to be the first, right? They want to be able to, in 10 years from now, when this, and they can say when Seattle's building, their mighty hero home base, Georgia can say, wow, we did it first, right? They like that, right? And I that's ego. I love it, right? Let's make it happen.
Competition, man.
But there was some legal issue. It was county land, but inside city limits. And so the city had a moratorium on development for residential because they were growing so fast south of Atlanta that they had to put in the infrastructure, right, to be able to handle it. And the county said, oh, we'll just annex the land. Okay, well, great, right? So we were not promised. I don't want to, do it, right. But hey, we'll make this happen. Well, when that happened, legally, right, it was a struggle. And so legally, there was a lawsuit that happened between the city and the county. And so that's been tied up now. So that's, we know how those things work out. It may take a year, it may take 10 years, may never get solved. Right.
That's right.
And so, but that was this thing where I can tell you, and honestly, all of these individuals want to make this happen. They love Mighty Hero Homes. They love our veterans and our homeless veterans. They want to help. But then there was other extraneous issues going on that they had to deal with in order to make it happen. So that's just, again, just a, real life example of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And we're not even talking, I mean, you're talking, we're talking Georgia, right?
Yeah.
How many counties did you say?
We have 152 or 159, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'm not good at math. It's the one thing. Okay. There's not many things I'm not good at, but I can promise you math is one of those, right?
Right.
I do know there's 50 states,
yeah.
right? I know inside of those states, there's a whole crap ton of counties. So when you start doing the math, if every state only had 100 counties, that's a lot, right?
Right.
But what I don't think the normal individual understands is, you've got state leadership, you got city leadership, and then you got county leadership. And it's not as easy as you would think because a city may be in 3 or 4 different counties, which is just a very unique. So the number of folks to be able to help, if we were to pick Los Angeles as a good example, right? And because I went to LA a lot and, I've seen a lot of homeless folks there, probably more than anywhere else during my time. I mean, Seattle's probably close too, but I just remember going, man, like, LA's pretty good because you got LA County and then like the way that they have it laid out, but like it's very simple that you go over here, it's not over here, it is like and the way the county and the city think are completely different and what they're allowed to do is completely different. And
Right.
sometimes the city wins, sometimes the county wins. Like it's just really weird. Now all of
Yeah.
a sudden you got to have 15 people in the room to just get this thing. And the problem is it's not that it's, because they've got to look future. They're looking now and they're also
Sure.
looking future, right?
Right.
And we want to hope that they're all doing the right thing and they understand the process. But to be fair, everything changes over time, right? So you want to do it the best way and all of that. And of course, that's why organizations like yours exist. So I hear you from my perspective. I get it. Like this is the whole idea of government. That's why I brought up the government.
Right.
You know, just legalities in general. Then of course, local and county, cities and states and all that, because all of these folks are players in this. In this, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
They all have a play, which makes what you're trying to do even harder
Right.
because you're spending
Yep.
so much in administrative. Nobody wants to talk about the nonprofits administrative side because they just want to see that you're doing right. Well, we just explained the part right here where there may be a thing where you're going in to get a piece of property, and now there's a legality basis of this that you've got to do research. I mean, the city and the county is not going to do that for you.
Right.
You want the land, man. You want to. You got to help.
Yeah.
You got to bring me that data.
Right. Yeah. And there's a group down in Savannah that's building a veterans village, and he and I first touched base probably a year or so ago, year ago June maybe, and I touched base with him again back in the summer this year, August or September, and he started going through. I was like, hey, how are you guys coming along in your development? Well, we haven't broken ground yet because this came up, right? We had a $2,500 bill that the city needed for this. We had this come up, right? It's like it was just this constant flow. So he said, I don't know what your discretionary budget is, right? But set aside an extra probably 10 to 20% because you're just going to be hit with all kinds of things that you can't prepare for. They just come out of the blue, right? And so I was like, yeah, I'm trying to prepare for it as much as I can. We got a great team, development team, construction services team, and civil engineering team, and project management team on that are just phenomenal. So hopefully they can help me address all those to make sure that we're not getting hit out of left field, every other week.
Yeah, it's so frustrating to me though. Like, and again, my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of Derek here, but I do tell you from my perspective, it's very frustrating though. I think if I'm trying to help anybody, doesn't matter, veteran, non-veteran, doesn't matter. Like if we come to the table, man, we got a great idea. I think it's the first time that everybody should kind of come to the table and say, hey man, what's the right thing to do here? We don't need to make money off of a thing that really is not about making money for anybody, right? It is truly about the individual. The bad part about the kind of situation you guys are in is that all of these things, in my opinion, there should be some waivers that are happening because there is an end state. If you walk into me and tell me, hey man, 3 years from now, 60-70% of your budget is no longer going to be on homelessness. I'm not a mathematician. Derek's told you the one thing I'm not good at. That's a lot, right? In my mind, I go, wow, it's more than, I know 10% is a lot, but you're telling me 50 to 60. Holy crap, man. Yeah, let's talk.
Right.
Show me this. Like, bring it in and let me see this. I have my finance person come in. We're looking down at the paper and you start going, okay. Do I need, as a city, a county, a state, need to make money off of, can we waive these costs with the idea that I'm making my money back on the backside of this, right? Like in 3 years, the majority of this issue is now resolved. Not all of it, right? But a good chunk of it is. Man, this is like a no-brainer to me, right? So it's such a hard. So good on y'all is all I'm going to say, because it's definitely just hearing you talk about it. You're so good at because you're in this world and you understand it, and it's just like a process. It's the stuff in the government that, I mean, obviously spent a long time in the government. It was always the frustrating part of coming up with an idea. And then waiting 8 to 10 years for that thing. For me, the hardship of this is that we have folks that are living on the street that are ultimately deciding to take their lives because they can't get the help that they need, but we can't figure out how to help you and other organizations get the 1 acre of land that you're asking for. Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's one of those things. Okay. Anyway, let's get off that, because that's just a whole other thing. And that'll take us down this whole thing. And nobody wants to hear my opinion anyway. Okay. So we talked about the scope of it, why
Mhm.
solving it matters, right? They're people. I mean, I think that's the easy answer. They're people first and foremost. And then the second part of that is being kind. Third part of that is, hey, they went above and beyond for our nation multiple times for some of these.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do what we can to help them. And I think you do that for anybody, right?
Sure.
Somebody that spent their life helping other people, man. And if you don't like helping people, that's okay. That's you. Like, I'm not holding it against you. But if you're doing it, man, I want to take time. We understand long-term solutions a little bit, right? There's a part of this that's a policy-based thing. That policy, though, is not just at the government level. You know, it's the state, it's the city, it's the county. There's a lot of this stuff that you're working through right now to figure it out. That now kind of takes us into what you started to have the conversation with, and we've kind of touched on a little bit, but just Mighty Hero Homes,
Yeah.
right? You guys, you saw the gap. You found somebody else that saw the gap, right? Like you
Right.
guys immediately came together. That's what entrepreneurs do. People forget nonprofits are businesses. I'm so happy that
Yeah.
you said that.
Yeah.
You guys came together and said, "Hey, man, we got to change. We got to make an impact for those that have been selfish." And I also don't want to forget this because it is forgotten sometimes. We're not just talking about veterans here. Sometimes it's their families as well,
Absolutely.
right? So it's their
Yep.
spouse, it's their kids, which is a whole nother rant that we could go on, but we're not going to.
Right. Yeah.
So we it's not that we owe, it's they deserve. Everybody deserves.
Yep.
So talk me through Mighty Hero Homes, the approach, right? Like what
Mhm.
you guys are focused on right now, kind of where you are today, where you want to be kind of a year from now, and any progress that you've had as you guys have kind of developed this thing out.
Okay. Yeah. And before I touch on that, I mean, I think again, touching on what you talk about families, when I speak in front of a group of people, I always try to recognize the spouses, the kids of veterans that serve because they go unappreciated, right? We focus on the veteran that's over, that has sacrificed and put themselves in harm's way or is, halfway across the country, halfway across the world serving and their family's still back here. And they sacrifice just as much as the veteran
100%.
who's serving
That's right.
it, right? And so
And sometimes more.
you want to point out, yeah.
And sometimes
So
more, right? Because the hardship, let's be
correct,
real. I'm overseas. I have a support system around me.
right?
I mean, think about it. I have a support system. It's called brother sister. It's like you going to college. So you'd mentioned earlier, not knowing, like, you were
Yeah,
part of college. You had roommates, like
yeah,
that basis of cost. So imagine taking that 4 years and spreading it to 8, 10, 12, 20 years.
right,
That little group is what that because the only difference is maybe there's some hardships in there, right? Maybe a little
yeah,
bit of combat here and there. You know what I mean? Maybe we ate dirt together. Maybe I got
right,
smoked by Big Sarge for a couple hours and like all these
right,
things, right? That happen. Um, some families don't have any support mechanism.
right,
So you almost sometimes forget that. So I love that when you're
yeah,
talking to folks that you bring it up because that is
yeah.
we all forget it sometimes.
Yeah, because their sacrifice is just as important as the veteran or the male or female who's
That's
stepping
right.
into the boots. So yeah, I wanted to touch on that. So what we saw, right, again, was that gap of the permanent, affordable, sustainable, in perpetuity housing, right? VA's been good at working with different groups about the transitional, getting individuals in for 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever it is, right, to deal with their problem, and then they get sent back out. Well, usually they're sent out, and kind of going back what you touched on earlier, they come out financially, they're like, okay, well, shoot, I got to pay bills. I wasn't paying bills when I was in this, sponsored program for 120 days, right, or whatever it was. So it's helping them with their financial literacy also, right? So
That's right.
as we're providing them the housing support, the mental health support, those wraparound services that are so key there, it's also helping them understand income and expenses, right? And things aren't always even when you come on base, right? I mean, we're not Pollyannic enough to believe that everyone's going to come on. They're all going to have $100,000 plus paying jobs. They're never going to be unemployed, right? And things are just kumbaya. We're all going to be singing hallelujah together, right? They're going to fall on hard times.
That's right.
And the thing that I really, really, really appreciated, enjoyed about and this is different than what I wanted to do when I was talking about, back in the financial crisis, I was doing individual homes. What Drew saw was that need for community. And,
Mhm.
the individual homeless veterans that I've spoken with and sat down with and heard their story, one of their main things was that I didn't have a neighbor that
That's right.
walked my boots, right? They didn't have a clue what I went through. So who do I talk to? And in this instance, and this was the guy Thomas I was talking to that I mentioned earlier, he was saying, when I was self-medicating, I was going through my issues and I went through my veteran court. If there had been a Mighty Hero home base that I was living in where I knew that Ray had my DOC, right, my drug of choice. And so Ray could say, well, Thomas doesn't look right, I'm going to go over and check on it, right? And just having those brothers and sisters that you could talk to, right? That, like you talked about earlier, it's hard for us to be vulnerable as men anyway, but now put yourself in a veteran situation. If I'm in an apartment community or I'm in a neighborhood and nobody around me served, I'm not going to go sit and break bread with, my next door neighbor and pour out my feelings to him, right? Because he or she's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Right. It rub some dirt on it. Right. That's, again, I was born in a generation where, if you fell down, say, hey, rub some dirt on it. Your
Yeah, yeah,
father
man.
touched you on the head. Right.
So get back out there. Go again.
Right. Yeah. And while that's still, I think, worthwhile, it also doesn't touch on that fact though, that, having a father that you could go to and say, hey dad, right. And and talk to him about what you were going through. Right. And
Mhm.
so having that support system on base, when you go to mightyhomes.org, you'd be able to see again, the base concept. We're building squadrons of 12 homes or pods, squadrons or whatever, of little 12 home casitas, right? Small homes that are built around an activity center. And that activity center serves as an extension of their home, because these homes are small, right? They're not 1,200, 1,500 square foot homes. They're tiny
Yeah.
homes. They're get on your feet, right? If you want to buy it, you can buy it. You never have to move from it, right? But
Mhm.
you can live here permanently. But we understand you're going to want to get together with your neighbors on Tuesday night and play cards, right? Or Saturday nights and watch, college football. So rather than cramming, 10 people into your small living room, you have an activity center. And so there'll be an activity center with every squadron. So out of 84 homes, that's 7 squadrons of 12, right? There'll be 7 activity centers. So you could do one, have an activity every night in one, each different activity center. But it's really bringing that community and trying, the idle hands of the devil's workshop type of mentality, right? We want to try to create as many activities as possible for these individuals to partake in. So, in a perfect world, we're going to have 20 plus acres of land. And so obviously the housing is not going to take up all the land. So I'm not trying to create this mass high density development. I'm trying to create a community where, you and I might drive by and say, well, those homes are kind of small, but it's a community I'd live in, right? It's a
Mhm.
nice community. It's well done, right? We're
Yeah.
going to be gated, right? Have 24/7 security, offer, again, like I said earlier, income producing positions on our base for the veterans, because there are going to be veterans that aren't going to be able to work offsite, right? For either a mental health or a physical disability issue, can't stand on their feet, can't do this, can't deal with noise, right? Or whatever. So, all right, well, once you come in and you'll be the commissary, checkout person, right? Or you'll be the welcome desk, or you can work in the guard shack. So trying to create that, community, but that's safe and sound. One of the, I got from a mother one time when we were talking about a potential property development. And, her pushback was, my daughter walks by there on her way home from school. Like, how do I know that some veteran, right, that was, because their mentality is that we're going out tonight, finding homeless veterans, bringing them and saying, hey, we got a home for you, right? And that's not the case. So I want to make sure that's clear. These individuals are going through some program. Here in Georgia, there's a great program, Cherokee County Homeless Veteran Program. And, he's already called us 2 or 3 times, back a year or so ago. And you say, hey, I got Derek. Here's what his or her issues were. Here's what we helped them with. We've got them a job coming out making $75,000 or whatever. We're getting them a car, right? So they'll have
Yeah.
transportation. They just need somewhere to go. Do you have a home, right? So that person would come to us, our intake group would look at them, right? Look at their file, make sure that we've got what they need, right? On base, make sure that we've got that in perpetuity for them to access on our base. Yep, we got a home. Great. They come to us. What we're also doing is creating a Operation Welcome Home Mighty Hero, where we're going out to the outside community, so outside the fence line, let's say, where we're going to a civic organization or a church or even a family that says, hey, I want to adopt that veteran. So when that veteran comes onto our base, Derek is adopted by civic organization X. They're making sure that sheets are on the bed, that there's, linens in the closet, right? There's food in the pantry for them, so that when they come on, they're not going, oh crap, it's 8 o'clock at night. I haven't gotten food. I don't have a car. I can't go to the grocery store. Right. They've been adopted. Right. And that also helps,
Yeah.
kind of going back to what you talked about earlier. Friday night football games, Sunday night church service, right? The Veterans Day parade, right? Where they're being invited to these things by the community. And so they have a community in their squadron, they have a community on their base, and they have a community outside their base. And so and we know, again, go back to your point earlier too, we can't be all things to all people. We know we can't provide every single service on our base, but those critical ones, the key component ones, is what we're trying to touch upon, and then partner with outside organizations. And again, we're not mental health experts, so we're partnering with groups that are, right. We're not substance abuse experts. We're partnering with groups that are. And but also if we can't provide that service on base for some reason, making sure that within our community that that's there. And then, finally, the question always comes up, well, if they buy their home, but now they outgrow it, where do they go? And so we're working with Habitat for Humanities and different type of organizations like that to say, why don't we follow you or you follow us? And so when this person does say, all right, I'm ready to start a family, but I can't live with my family in this unit, right? But if I to go buy something, I got to move 20 miles away. Now I'm not going to the same church I was going to. My kids aren't going to the same school, or I'm not shopping at the same place. I'm losing that community. They can move hopefully 2 miles or a mile down the street, still be able to be friends with their group, get together with them or whatever, but not, and so they're not losing that sense of community. And, again, the one thing too, that we touched on earlier, kind of going back to that community, I listened to a TED talk by Sebastian Younger, I think it was, from several years ago. He talked about the decline, the decreasing number of people who served, right? So he goes back to, obviously Civil War, then to World War I, World War II on down. And what his point and kind of a trigger thing that he had for the mental health side was that, when Ray came back, his father may not have served, right? His uncle didn't serve, his brother didn't serve. And so as he's sitting around the Thanksgiving table and he's got issues going on he needs to talk about, he can't talk about with his family. Whereas the World War II veteran most likely had a father that served in World War I,
That's
right?
right.
Or again, maybe an older brother, right? So they were generationally close enough, and where, again, they stood up and they went to service, right? It was hey, we're going to rally around the flag, but you had commonality with your brothers, your cousins, your fathers and stuff like that, and your uncles, whereas you don't now. And he was using that as a contributing factor to the mental health decline because they can't talk about it with people that they know and love, right? That they're familiar with. So anyway, just wanted to touch on that also.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's, all of that to me is, I like to call it real talk, right? It's been just a little bit of time in the transition space. I say a little bit, it was a couple of years, but I remember going into that with this mindset of, man, we're going to help, we're going to figure out a way. And I go to these companies and we do all these things, man, and we'll get jobs and all that, because I just didn't, if you know anything about me, I did not have we'll say I was lucky in life because I definitely lived, um, at the highest points that you can live inside of the military and the stuff that I had the opportunity to do. So I thought, man, when I get out, man, this is going to be easy, right? Like this is
Right.
going to be the easiest thing I've ever done, man.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't. So I remember it was like 3 days after like physically leaving, just going, wow, man, like there's nobody's calling, nobody's talking to me, like any of that stuff. And then I immediately start to have this like concern in my mind of, like, what is happening right now? Like, why
Right.
can't it be? What is this private, this somebody who is, I'm an E9 trying, and I should have an easy go at this, but I'm
Yeah.
not, right? And I am skilled, and it's not because I'm a narcissist or I think I'm just better than
Sure.
everybody. No, no, I'm good, right? Just like I
Right.
think everybody that has served has tangible skills, and if I'm having a problem, what's everybody else doing? But I
Right.
remember coming out that there was a point where it just dawned on me, you gotta have real talk with people, man. You
Yeah.
gotta, like, what do they really wanna do, man? Like, if you're just going out and getting a job to get a job, man, it's not gonna work out for you, right? You
Right.
gotta take ownership for this. Again, it goes back to responsibility, accountability of this thing, right? I can
Yep.
help you. I can get you somewhere to live, but you gotta be part of the solution, man. You can't be part of the
Correct.
problem, right?
Yeah.
I'm like you have to, because I can only help you somewhere. I'm, the whole horse thing. I can walk you to water, man, but I
Leaving.
can't make you drink, right? So there's
Right.
there's a part of it. So I appreciate what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. I think it's going to be interesting, and I think there's going to be a lot that's going to be learned as you guys continue to expand this
Oh yeah.
and you start to open these up and you look at how to do it. And I think that your idea of a community is really important, because I contribute my success now was because I found, which funny enough, we don't talk to them so much in Mission Roll Call. I mean, not we try, but we haven't had the opportunity to connect with them. But it's Team Rubicon. I mean, Team
Yeah.
Rubicon to me was
Right.
the connection piece,
Yep.
which goes back to, um, gosh, you just said it, humanity. What?
Mhm.
Um, anyway, the organization that you talk about, what Team Rubicon and them are like
Oh,
connected.
Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity. Thank you. They're
Mhm.
connected. As soon as you said that, it brought a smile on my face, because I thought about like that community level, how impactful those organizations were to like who I am now, which gave me the fire to be why I'm here, even in this organization, right?
Right.
Because this is not a job to me. It is. I mean, obviously, you get
Sure.
paid all that, but why I'm here is to make impact. End of the
Right.
day, there is no other reason. And 2, 3 years from now, if I do my job, man, I'm out. And if I don't do my job,
Right.
replace me, right? Like that's
Right.
always the piece. So,
Yeah.
so that brings, what does your success look like for Mighty Hero Homes? I mean, obviously you guys are moving into this, you're getting started, you really starting to ramp things up. What does
Right.
that success look like for you 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the road?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we need to build something, right? And so
Yeah.
getting a base built, right? And we'll start with a squadron, right? Just so that
Yep.
people can understand the concept. And so we're working right now in middle of Georgia on so Henry County is still there, right? So we still have access to that land. We just, again, can't develop on it. So working with another municipality that's really moving mountains for us. And so we're extremely grateful. It just came about probably in the last 2 months, 3 months or so. And so that will be our groundbreaking success. We hope. We haven't got approval yet, but everybody's working in unison to make it happen. And so once that happens, we build a squadron. People can see what's going on, open up then, do an after action review, go to squadron 2, right? Build out the whole base
Yep.
there. Working with the local county here in Atlanta they have a major veteran homelessness issue in their county. And so they've already contacted us and say, hey, we will secure the project-based HUD-BASH vouchers, which is what we need. We prefer.
Right.
We don't need it, but we prefer them.
Right.
And they said, you find the land, we'll secure everything else for you. So that helps me with the financing part of it, right? Whether it be donation-based or obviously if I've got to go to some type of traditional financing part of it. But it's rallying those communities around the cause, right? Then will lead to me being able to go and raise money a lot easier, right? Once I've got land and people can see what we're doing. The way we look at the success is different than and I may have touched on this earlier. When we first started, not say Drew's first, thing was, when I hand over the key to the last homeless veteran, I'll have served my mission.
Yeah.
And that's still obviously our goal. But what we've expanded on is when we take 84 veterans who, again, whether they served in combat or were stateside, but that operated drones, right? That worked on, Humvees and the engineering, the mechanical side. Like, these are individuals who have a high intellect, right? They're not, I'd say my grandfather was a farmer, right? He dropped out of school at 8th grade because he had to go work on the farm, but
Well, you obviously kicked me out as soon as you said high intellect, and I don't like the way that you looked at me and laughed, Derek. I'm going to throw that out there. Go ahead, I'm kidding.
But these individuals they are going to have, generally speaking, they're going to have good paying jobs, right? They're going to contribute to their local economies. And when they become coaches in Little League, right, and they become teachers at the local schools, right, and they become you're making generational impact. And it's not just, oh, you help house that person, great, thank you, pat on the back for somebody, and, oh, Mighty Hero Homes, you're doing a good job. It's 5 years from now when we run into that mayor, and that mayor says, I got to tell you, it's been incredible what Mighty Hero Homes Base has done. And it just changed the scope of our downtown economy. It's just changed the scope of our community, whatever it may be. That's really where we see success. But then on a larger scale, national, so we can't do this alone, right? Like we talked about earlier. At the same time, when we first started, Drew threw at me, hey, here's how many bases I want to build a year. And I just told him, there's no way. It's not possible. I can't do it sitting here in Atlanta by myself. Even if I had a team of 100 people, I can't do it. So what we're coming up with is a franchise model. So if someone, in North Carolina like yourself says, I have a heart for veterans, I'm sitting on 20 acres of land I don't know what to do with, or, hey, I'm an elected politician, I've got excess land in my county, I want to make this happen here. We partner with someone there, right? You would say to me, hey, I've got 10 acres of land, I think I can do 60 homes, and maybe I can't do a 6,000 square foot community center, maybe it's a 4,000 square foot, but I don't have the time to go into the research that you've done, pull the materials together, who are the providers, who are the distributors, put the teams together, whatever. Can I just buy it from you? And so we would have a franchise model. So I would take all of that and say, yep, it's going to cost you X, Y, or Z. We'll put the order in, right? They get delivered because we're doing SIPs, structurally insulated panel homes. So we're not doing stick built. These are wall panel systems that are just plugged together, glued together. They're hurricane proof. They're 150 mile an hour proof walls and structures. The HERS value, which may not mean anything to you, it means the utility cost, right? The lower the HERS number, the better. Stick built is usually in the 80s. These are in their can get to 30s, but probably 40s to 50s. So you're having a tremendous cost savings on a monthly basis. And so to communities that are trying to help the affordable side of the equation, having a person, whether it be someone that's just in workforce housing or a veteran that struggle with homelessness, having their cost only be $70 a month versus $220 a month is a huge deal, right?
That is.
So keeping the cost low on that. But our focus for 3 to 5 years from now is I'm hoping that, especially through the Southeast at least, right, which is where we do have a major problem with veteran homelessness, that I've got one in every state. But it's not a Mighty Hero Homes necessarily built community. It's a Ray Whitaker built with the help of Mighty Hero Homes by him wanting to change his community and help homeless veterans. So that franchise model is going to be something that our board is in full support of, because that allows us to have a much broader reach and have a quicker success as well, and help solve the problem in a quicker way.
Well, great. Well, the thing I love about this, I love the success of putting it in the hands of the community for the community to get involved, right? So for
Yeah.
those that are listening today, what I really want to leave you with Derek is that it's the idea that I think you guys came into this with the idea, man, we're going to conquer the world, right? And as you start to
Yeah.
conquer it, you go, oh man, okay,
It's a bigger world.
we can do this, but man, I don't know if I'm going to be here by the time we get to this instant. Like, how do we speed this up, right? And oftentimes it's having more people fighting the thing, right?
Yeah.
To continue to grow this, to make it better. And I think the way that your approach is of thinking of ways to do that is good. So for those that are listening right now that may have that, extra land, that may be, somebody who is part of just a do-gooder, man. You want to do good things for people. You think this is a phenomenal idea. Contact Derek. And what's your website, Derek, so that they know?
It's just www.mightyherohomes.org.
Okay.
And we're
So you
on
can go
Instagram.
there, contact you guys. Okay.
Yeah,
Instagram,
it's
Facebook, all the things. Well, Meta. I better not say the wrong thing. Maybe
right,
get kicked
Meta,
off the
exactly.
platform.
Yeah.
So first off, Derek, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Know that Mission Roll Call is like all in, right? There are things that you guys are focused on that you're trying to work through that I know our organization can help with, right? If there's
Okay.
anything more that we focus on, is the idea of taking problem sets, talking to the right people to then help figure out a commonality so that we can support veterans and their families, right? Like that's the
Right.
goal here, is to move towards that. So you already know that. We've already been working with you guys. That's why obviously you're on the podcast, but don't dismiss that after this podcast, that there
Sure.
is
No, I
an
appreciate it.
opportunity here for us to connect, talk more, and figure out how we can benefit each other, right? Your benefit to me is that you're helping brothers and sisters. The benefit to you is that we now put resources towards helping you get through some of the tape, right? Some of the issues that you may be having as you move forward. We talked about your website. So phenomenal. Anybody that's listening, please, take a little bit of time, go understand about it. Nobody should not live in their own house or just in a house in general. They may rent.
Right.
I mean, that's your choice, right? Financially,
Yeah.
but everybody should be off the streets and being a productive part of their community. I think what you guys are trying to do leads to that, right? It's not just about them. It's more about those around them. And I love the way it kind of gave me the weird feeling though, because you start talking about, it took back a basic trainer, right? You got starships and we got like a
Right.
common area in the middle. And I'm like, all right, man, if I see a dude walk out with a brown round, man, I'm done. Like, I'm not going
Right.
in this place, right? But the
Right.
reality is, it is something that I remember. It's something that I know. It is such an interesting thought from you guys to relate it back to something that very much for us is like immediately like, yeah, Starship, man, common center in the middle. We call it common area, right in the middle, man. I go back in there and I can do all of these things that we want to do, play video games, have card night, dog train, whatever it is, man, we have the ability. So I want to see you guys get this thing. Any kind of final notes, Derek, from you? Anything that you forgot to mention?
No, I mean, I would just say again, this is, okay, we touch out kind of throughout the thread of this, right? It's a we the people issue that we can solve, right?
That's
We can't rely on the government. And so, if we can put the right coalition together, have the right support, right? If we were trying to had a fundraising campaign that we've been working with, they're trying to get 1 million patriots to make a one-time donation of X amount of money. It was $100, whatever, because then that just all of a sudden, we don't think there'd be a problem finding 1 million people that would say, this is an issue, even though it's not in my backyard that I'm helping, right? Their first community is going to be in Georgia. I'm going to donate $100, right? Because I have a soft spot and I want to see these people housed and I want it to be successful. So it will come to my community. And so just relying on each other, right? Like you guys do in the service, right? Like you said, you rely on the person on your right and on your left. And while you may be competing with them, you also rely on them. You've got their back, they've got your back as well. And it's just making sure we advance the line together. And, the closer we are, the more cohesive we are as a body, the stronger we are, right? And I don't want the right hand to know what the left hand's doing. We need to all know what's going on, right? And working, like you said, lean on you for support of the things that we may need help with, right? That's fantastic, right? We never leave a conversation when we're pitching what we're doing without saying, Ray, how can we help you, right? What can we do to be of service to you as well? Because again, this is a team effort. It's a we the people issue that we can remedy. It's a crisis that's growing. It's not getting. We know the affordability crisis isn't getting any better. We know that more mental health struggles are happening, which is more breakups are happening in a family. So this is an exacerbating problem, but we can put a plug in it, right? We can stop it and then start to work on the solutions to it. And with everybody's help, we can make that happen.
Great, man. Well, I appreciate you guys from a veteran and our entire mission roll call and all the veterans listening. Thank you. Thank you for you and your entire team, everybody that's there, that's focused on this, for seeing a gap and trying to fill it. Right. And we're here. We want to help. For those that are listening, thank you so much for listening today. As always, don't forget, you guys, we're on all the platforms. If I don't say this, then I'm positive that Nate's going to 2-foot kick me. So I want to make sure you guys follow, listen, like, comment, like all those things. Okay. It all helps, good or bad. If it's bad, I'm not going to read it. We're going to have Nate read it because it's just better, right? I love like bringing his day down. So if you guys are posting it, but in all realness, tell us what you want, how you would like to hear more about Mission Roll Call, and then great organizations like Mighty Hero Homes, what they're doing and the focus they are. We appreciate you guys. We thank you guys for your service, and for everybody else that just wants to help veterans, we appreciate you. Hope you guys have a happy holidays, and we'll see you guys on the next one.